Let's continue here on the program. Where, as you can see there, we're joined by a young lady. As a matter of fact, you've seen her more recently, especially with the World Cup. And Alexis Nunes, soccer host and reporter on ESPN. She's the co-host of ESPN FC, doing some really big things as she joins us here on the program. Happy New Year to you, Alexis.
Happy New Year. I keep forgetting that we're into January already. It's a whole new year. I was still writing 2022, but bring it on.
I'm telling you. How was Christmas? How was the holidays?
Honestly, Christmas was, I spent it away from home. For those that don't know, I'm from Jamaica still, but I do live in London for work naturally. And unfortunately, I didn't get to go home for a warm Christmas. I literally landed from Qatar covering the World Cup 3 days before Christmas. And then I had to do two Carabao Cup, which is a league cup over here, matches. And then I came back literally just in time for Christmas Eve and Christmas. And I spent it at home in my house with one of my best friends who's from Canada. We just had a little cozy Christmas with my dog. We cooked and that was it. No big thing this time of year. I was literally just looking forward to some rest after 6 weeks in Doha.
I'm telling you, you've got a super busy schedule. Now see, on your Instagram page, it also mentions food. So you're a foodie, right? So what did you cook for Christmas? What was for Christmas dinner?
I am a mad foodie. I love to cook. My father taught me how to cook. He loved to cook as well. You have to cook with love. And so this time around, obviously, like here in the UK, a lot of people eat, I think, maybe similarly to some parts of the US, probably eat a lot of turkey, roast potatoes and stuff. But then in Jamaica, we have a completely different spread. So I made like stew chicken, Jamaican brown stew chicken. For Christmas, for us in Jamaica, everybody knows that Jamaicans eat rice and peas, but for Christmas and special occasions, we bring out rice and gungo peas, which is it's similar, I would say, to pigeon peas. And you cook that down with the coconut milk and all of the seasonings and whatnot. And when I came back from Qatar to London, I was like, I just feel for a taste of home. Like, it's not Christmas if I don't have rice and gungo peas and I don't have some sort of like Jamaican style chicken. So I made the rice and gungo peas, and I made the brown stew chicken as well. My friend from Canada made a salad and some other nice bits. So we had a little Jamaican Canadian Christmas in London.
Y'all had the whole everything going on right there. So your thoughts overall, I want to get your thoughts overall on the World Cup and as a whole, and the way Qatar hosted the World Cup.
So for starters, that was my first World Cup that I've actually worked in person on location. The last one I did from our studios in Bristol, Connecticut at ESPN. So this one, I don't really have any other one to compare it to, but I think, and many people say this was probably the best World Cup we've seen in terms of how it was done. And we know that Qatar is in a special state. It's the richest country in the world, so they're able to afford certain luxuries. The stadiums are just next level. I remember sitting in a couple of the stadiums and feeling the air conditioning on each seat. Each seat at the bottom had air conditioning. It was just amazing. Retractable roofs, designs that, I feel belong maybe 50 years in the future, but here they were, because money was not an issue when they were building them. But I think one of the main things too that everybody, of course, was kicking up a fuss about, because in the Western world, when we're used to going to sporting events, we're used to having a drink or two. But of course, in the Middle East, that's not part of their culture. It's not part of their religion. And last minute, they had said, look, we're not going to be having any alcohol in the stadiums. And a lot of people were upset because of that. But in the end, it's the first time that I have gone to a football match and genuinely just felt such a wholesome atmosphere, like true patriotism, peace, that there weren't a lot of unsavory moments. Of course, a couple of, footballing nations have certain chants that are usually politically aligned or whatnot. So every now and again, you did hear those. But for the most part, as a woman covering football, and trust me, I've been doing this for like a decade now, standing outside of grounds or walking through the stands can be quite intimidating. Men will hurl whatever they can at you. If they know who you are, just because they know you're on camera. I always say that when people see a camera and camera lights, it makes them do silly things sometimes. But for the most part, even standing outside all of the stadiums in Doha, I felt unbelievably safe. The fans were amazing, and it was so good because it's a World Cup. You want to interact with the fans. It's such a special feeling to know that people from all over the world have made this journey here just to celebrate the beautiful game that we love, just to celebrate their country, just to support their country. And it was such a peaceful, wonderful hosting of the World Cup. And that was just off the pitch. On the pitch, in terms of the drama, the excitement, the quality that was thrown out there, I think that was definitely one of the most, if not the most entertaining World Cup I know I have definitely seen. So, and I know I'm quite young, but still, it was just unbelievable. There were very rare, I suppose, heavy one-sided games. Of course, there were a couple like Brazil with South Korea, but then look, the next match, Brazil were dumped out. It was, nobody could predict anything. So for me, it was an unforgettable experience. As somebody that wants to enter football, if you're just a fan of football or a journalist in football, I mean, you're the creme de la creme is to cover a World Cup. And to say that I did such an interesting one, which was the first one in the Middle East, first one in an Arabic country, it definitely will forever stay with me.
Alexis Nunes, soccer host and reporter on ESPN. You can check her out as one of the co-hosts of ESPN FC as she joins us here on the program. So Argentina wins it. Lionel Messi. Like, I'm not a big, I mean, I'll watch around the World Cup, you know, follow the US throughout the course of whatever season, although it had been some challenging times until this year, of course, where the US sort of came back a little bit. But your thoughts on Argentina winning it and Lionel Messi getting that World Cup, one of the greatest players to ever play?
It was written in the stars. Honestly, I think it was I guess we could say, I mean, unless you're France, if you're a French fan or a Frenchman or a Frenchwoman, definitely cover your ears now. But I think it was the perfect ending to a World Cup. I mean, I remember saying it before that you don't need to be a fan of football or soccer or Argentina or even Leo Messi to want to see him win a World Cup, because he's one of the greatest names to have ever played this sport. You know, whether you're a fan of the game or not, you know who he is. You have heard, you know, similarly for me, I lived 4 years in the US and I don't really know that much about NFL. I didn't get to catch on to it. But when I hear Tom Brady, I expect him to be in the Super Bowl every year, you know, and I kind of want him to win it as well. Sorry for anyone who doesn't like Tom Brady, I suppose, hearing this. It's not that deep with me. I just know Tom Brady, and I hear people say he's one of the greatest to ever play this game. They constantly mention his age. He's still out there. And you always want to see the greatest winning on the greatest stage. And this is the greatest show on earth, the World Cup. And it's the one thing that Leo Messi was missing. We mentioned him in the same breath as Pele, as Maradona. And the one thing that everyone said is like, yes, he's amazing, but this is what he's missing. I mean, the man retired, came out of retirement to help his country win the Copa America. He has been the scapegoat and carried that team and his country on his back so many years. And still, we were thinking that this is Messi that's going to retire without the greatest prize in the sport. And even though I still don't think, you know, it would have affected him that much, at the end of the day, he could have retired without the World Cup and we would still know that this is Leo Messi, one of the greatest to ever play the game, period. And in many people's eyes, the greatest. But the fact that he was able to do it and the fact that he played such a crucial role, were it not for him and his contributions, especially in Argentina's earlier games where they were literally just looking to him for some Messi magic. And that's exactly what he did time and time again. He is more than deserving of it. And I think it just was the fairy tale ending that everybody, apart from France, probably was hoping for. But that's because France are the defending champions. We saw Kylian Mbappe as well, who is like the heir apparent to the Messi and Ronaldo era. He absolutely did everything. It still baffles me as to how amazing this young man is in terms of Mbappe. But look, he's already won a World Cup as a teenager, something that only Pele has done. And I think he's got a couple, maybe 2, 3, maybe even 4, who knows, more World Cups left in him. So I think this was Messi's time. It was written in the stars and it was a fairy tale ending that so many of us wanted to see.
Yeah, and very well said. And I think when you look at it from the U.S. perspective, so I mean, you go back some years. I mean, it just wasn't good for the U.S. men. Of course, the women are phenomenal, but now they're in the World Cup and so forth. And even it was dicey in the very beginning. So I want to kind of get your thoughts on the way the U.S. performed as a whole in the World Cup.
All I have to say is the sport is in good hands. Like, we keep hearing about the golden generation of the US men's national team, and this is exactly what it is. And I know a couple of the players quite well, like Tyler Adams, who, name me a better captain. Amazing, just human being. Yunus Musa as well. You have Christian Pulisic there too, goalkeeper in Matt Turner. I've spoken to a lot of them time and time again this year, especially as I've been covering the CONCACAF qualifiers that the US were in. Of course, then they did a couple of friendlies before the World Cup itself. So I got to pick their brains on it. And I know they hate being called the golden generation. They feel it does invite unnecessary pressure. But I think they definitely should look at it as a good thing. Unnecessary pressure, yes, it comes, which is why everyone needs to kind of slow their roll a bit, give them time. Remember, this was one of, if not the youngest team on average at the World Cup. You have Tyler Adams, who was the captain at 23 years old, leading your country in a World Cup. That is unbelievable, and he did it so well. And I think that for the US, the expectations went in because of this golden generation. I remember doing that match that they eventually got knocked out and against the Netherlands. And I had to speak to some Dutch fans outside, and I asked them, what do they feel about this match today? Are they feeling good about the Netherlands? Because the Netherlands hadn't really impressed that much in their group stages. And they said they were actually nervous. For the first time, they were nervous whenever they hear this US men's national team, because one of them told me, in the past, I could probably name Landon Donovan, Tim Howard. He's like, now I know the entire starting 11, and I know which clubs they play in around Europe. I know exactly what they've won. They've got a Champions League winner in Christian Pulisic. This US men's national team crop of players strikes fear in other teams now. They're a force to be reckoned with. And I think that the bar was set so high. Do I feel like they coulda, woulda, shoulda made it at least one step further, maybe to the quarterfinals? Yes, of course. But then other teams like Brazil should have definitely probably made it to the final. It was such a crazy, unpredictable World Cup. And I think with this US national team, it's definitely in good hands. I think definitely give them time. They are still finding their way. There's questions as to whether Greg Berhalter is the right leader for them as well. That, of course, I suppose time will tell in terms of the style they want to play. I compare it a lot to what we see here in England. It's like having a garage filled with Ferraris, Maseratis, Bentleys, and then choosing to drive a minivan, and that's the way that they play. Sometimes fans don't like how they play too cautiously because they've got pace, they've got physicality, they've got intelligence on the ball as well. They're just missing a little bit in the final third in terms of a consistent goal scorer, like a Leo Messi, or like an Mbappe, a man that, once they touch the ball, that ball's going in. But other than that, I think it's all positivity for this US men's national team for sure. Just give them a bit more time, and they're definitely already a force to be reckoned with in the world of football.
Alexis Nunes, soccer host and reporter on ESPN. Check her out on ESPN FC. She also covers cricket, which we'll talk about a little bit. She joins us here on the program. You mentioned Pele, and he passed away, of course, on last week. You mentioned Messi. I mean, whenever I thought about soccer kind of coming up and so forth, it was Pele. So your thoughts on his legacy?
Yeah, I mean, I do this. I have a career because everybody in Jamaica supports a second team, because unfortunately in Jamaica, we only made it to one World Cup. That was the World Cup in '98. And I was so young then that I remember it, but I couldn't really take it in now. But before that, everybody in Jamaica loves Brazil. My dad used to sit me down to watch Brazil matches. He was like, watch this. This is real football. The Joga Bonito. And for my generation too, it was coming off of the likes of Ronaldo, Rivaldo, Ronaldinho, Cafu, etc. Legends too. But for my dad, it was always, of course, Pele. Everybody, much like I said, Messi, you don't even have to be a fan of the game, but everybody in the world knows who Pele is. They know exactly what he's done. It only takes a simple, Google search to see some of the videos of what he did. And this is before technology and stuff came up like we have now. For example, like the balls that they make now are more conducive for this goal scorer, I mean, if you're a defender, sorry, but it makes goals not necessarily easier, but it turns a bit more. It has like more spin on it. And back then, Pele just did it without the fancy boots, without the fancy balls, without all this fanciness. And he brought that for that joga bonito. Erling Haaland said it, that everything that you see any footballer doing today, Pele did it first. And that's so true, because he was the first to really marry playing the game, but adding that flair, adding that dance, that South American samba football that we've all come to know and love, and playing it with such love. And he, forever, for me, if I had to choose a GOAT, he would be, because the man won 3 World Cups. I don't know how we're going to see it again, probably with Mbappe, with what I just said. He came very close to winning 2 right now. But Pele, for me, is definitely the GOAT. What he did, not just his natural skill, but what he did just for the game. He was one of the first to go over and be a pioneer and play football in the United States as well, to bring those eyes there. And he had just such a presence and true love for the game that I don't know, when we probably will see again. But for me, Pele is what made me definitely fall in love with football. And I think he's someone that supersedes and surpasses all generations. It doesn't matter what age you are. You definitely know Pele, you know what he did, and you know what he means to the game.
Yeah, probably the first GOAT when you're talking about sports.
Yeah.
Really of all time. Alexis Nunes joining us on the program. A couple of more thoughts. We really do appreciate the time. Hosting Somos Afro Latinos. So tell us about that and why that was important to you. It was a big deal, and why it was important to you.
Yeah, actually, it was probably one of my most favorite pieces of work, or I think that we're most proud of, definitely, at ESPN. I don't know if you can see right there, but we actually won an award for it.
Very good.
A Vision Award for it. Yeah, it was honestly an amazing thing, an amazing idea too, because I think it just truly represents what, say, it helps me, and it helped me identify myself even more. And I feel like, for example, growing up in Jamaica, I've never ever, our motto is out of many one people. We understand that we're so heavily mixed of different cultures because of our history. And it was literally only when I moved to the US, when I got the job at ESPN, that I felt the need to explain to people what I am, because some would say, oh, but you don't really look Jamaican. And I said, well, Jamaican is a nationality. It's not a race, and we're mixed. And I would turn to them and I say, what does an American look like? Or what should an American look like? And then they're like, oh yeah, you're right. Exactly. Because what is one? And I find I am, of course, Jamaican. My mother's family is from El Salvador. So I'm like Latin, which is Afro-Latina too, because then people, when they think Latin, they think J-Lo, only. They don't forget the massive Afro community that is there. I mean, like I said, look at the World Cup, look at Ecuador. They are 90%, Black players there. Colombia as well has quite a few. Majority of them do, especially in Central America. And many people didn't know of the phrase Afro-Latino. And so many of them, look at, now celebrities like Cardi B, and then they go, well, is she Black or is she Latina? And you could literally be both. And that is so much of the US, to be Afro-Latina. And I remember we got to speak to so many athletes, from baseball players to track and field athletes to surfers, from all different parts of Latin America as well, straight from who are living in the US down to South America, like Venezuela, as well as Uruguay and Peru. And people were like, wow, I didn't even know that Uruguay had Black people, or I didn't know that Peru had Black people. And they themselves said, I didn't know what to identify as until now as an adult. And I've heard the phrase Afro-Latina. And now I confidently say that. And when you say that, it finally gives us, or people like me who are mixed with both Black as well as Latin, it gives us the identity I feel like so many people have wanted, and like I said, everyone wants to just feel like they belong. And it is such a horrendous question, I feel, when people go, what are you? because it makes you feel like you already just are not meant to be there, you know? And now when you say Afro-Latina or Afro-Latino, you start to see them go, oh, okay, all right, yeah, that works. I understand that, you know, and then they start to see the beautiful mix that is all around the US as well as the rest of the world too. So we got to do that. We got to hear their stories. Some were horrendous stories, as you can imagine, their constant battles with racism and you know, trying to prove that they do belong here at this highest level in sports, despite being Afro-Latina in the countries that maybe don't have a high population of Afro people. And it was just unreal to hear, you know, what they've achieved since then, all the awards. You know, you had World Series winners there that we got to speak to, because of course we know that baseball in the US is so heavily dominated by Puerto Ricans or Dominicans as well, a lot of from Venezuela too. And it was just, we just wanted to have a round table, and it was amazing to know that here we are from different parts of the world, but we all seem to have been struggling with and going through the same experiences. And now that we had this platform to talk about it, it was just truly a special thing. I think the show was supposed to be about like 20 minutes, and we ended up recording for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. There was just so more. And now, you know, those people, I feel like I've never met any of them in person. And I feel like, you know, we still stay in touch. And if I ever go to Peru, I will know exactly who to contact. If I go to Hawaii, I know who to contact. And it was a beautiful thing. And it got a lot of people who sent me messages after on social media saying, wow, you know, I loved hearing all of them talk, because growing up here, whether it was like in Michigan or LA, people just thought that being Latino meant you're Mexican. And because I'm Black, like I didn't know how to tell them that, well, my mom's from Colombia, my dad's African American, so I am Afro, but I'm also Latin. And everyone was like, I don't know if that exists. And now she's like, now I know we exist. So it was actually, it was a beautiful thing to be a part of.
Very important work, and definitely very well said. And thank you for explaining that too. That is really cool from all of the sports around the world. So we talked about cricket maybe a little bit early on. You also cover cricket. Now, as little as I know about soccer, I know even less about cricket, yet it's a big sport worldwide. You know, how did you get sort of involved in cricket as well?
Yeah, you know, I mean, cricket is the second most watched sport in the globe after, of course, football, soccer. So honestly, I got into cricket because it's for us in the Caribbean, it's like baseball as well. You know, for Americans, it's in the top 3 most played sports, depending on the island or country you're from. For example, Jamaica, of course, is really good in track and field. So I would say that supersedes everything now. Then there's football, then there's cricket. But it's historically, it's one of the oldest sports in the world. It's, you know, the English brought it, and when they had, you know, colonized the different countries around the world, which is why all of the Commonwealth countries or former colonies from England do play cricket, and we still play it today. It's a very old and traditional sport. You know, they say better the devil you know than the devil you don't, and it is the devil we know. People always, I used to try and explain to Americans how in cricket we break for tea, we break for lunch, and they're like, do you actually have tea? And I say, yeah, they go off and they have tea and sandwiches. It's a very traditionally English sport, but that's something that hasn't changed, and we love it, you know. And cricket's all around us in the Caribbean too. It's the boys play it in school. Now they've started to introduce it to the girls. We play as the West Indies, the entire Caribbean, whenever we play internationally. And yeah, my dad used to play a little bit too. He used to be part of Kingston Cricket Club, which is in Jamaica, which is attached to Sabina Park, which is our like Fenway Park, basically. It's our national cricket stadium. So whenever there's any international cricket match in Jamaica, in Kingston, it will be played there. And I used to just go, and I used to hate it because I get it. Cricket can look boring. People wonder how you can play for 5 days and still end in a draw. And after a while, I was like, you know what? Well, if you can't beat them, join them. And I started asking questions. I say, okay, Daddy, how do you know it's a wicket? How do you know it's leg before wicket? How do you know he's out? And before I knew it, it was ingrained in me as much as football. People ask me all the time if I had to choose between soccer and cricket, what would I choose? And I can't choose one. I literally am both. You know, it's a very beautiful traditional sport. Not all of it is 5 days. There's T20 cricket, which is about as long as a baseball match pretty much. I would say 3 or so hours. And then you have one day cricket, which does last the entire day. And then you break for tea as well. But you know what? If you've never tried cricket, definitely come down to the Caribbean, hop over to England in the summer, or head to Australia. There's an amazing vibe there. It's a very special historical game that, you know, is dear to a lot of our hearts.
Absolutely. Last thought for Alexis Nunes, and we appreciate the time. You know, and I again, not really watching soccer a lot, but the coverage of the World Cup, I saw you for the first time, and it was great because even in some of the coverage that I've seen in soccer, I've never seen a Black woman, right? And you just jumped out. So what does it mean to you to be sort of a trailblazer, right? Where other maybe young girls that look like you can kind of see that, hey, this is something I can do in the future?
Honestly, when we do those sports center hits, and I know it's going out to domestic, which is of course the US audience, which is primarily NBA, NFL, MLB kind of viewers. The response that I get after is actually a lot like that. People said, "Oh wow, I've never seen you around these parts. You know, you kind of make me want to like listen and tune into soccer now." And that makes me feel honestly so good because like you said, I still don't even feel like a trailblazer, you know, but I remember growing up in the Caribbean. People always ask me who my idols were, and they all were men, you know, they all were men because I never saw a woman doing what I do, especially on local television in the Caribbean. And it is kind of sad too that even now it's been like probably 10 years or so since I graduated and started working professionally. And then now I've been at ESPN for 8 years. There's still not that many, if any, you know, especially when I look back at the Caribbean. Of course, the US is bigger, so I do see more, but it still is such a niche thing, I would say, you know. I mean, I do the show as well, and 90% of our analysts and pundits are men. You know, the other day, at least for ESPN, while we were in the World Cup for ESPN Sports Center Mexico, since I speak Spanish as well, we had a roundtable where we did on Sports Center, and it was only women. And it was one of the most amazing things, I think, to be a part of, that we were there for 20 minutes just talking about the games, analyzing the games, looking forward to the next games. And it was just all women. You know, there was myself, there was someone from Venezuela, from Mexico, one from Costa Rica, one from Argentina. And it was just like, everyone was like, whoa, what is this going on here? But it truly, I mean, if I just had to say something, it definitely does make me feel proud that people can look at us and see this, because now that I've been here and now that I've been doing this at least 8 years at ESPN, there is such a place for us, you know, at least with the boys that I work with too. They've never made me feel that I don't deserve to be there because I'm a girl. If anything, they go twice as hard on me. You know, when we have the banter, they definitely throw me into the deep end all the time. And I remember one time, someone wrote on Twitter to our FC show, talking about Craig Burley, who's one of our analysts as well, former Scotland international. And they said, "Oh, next time, don't go so hard on Alexis. Like, you know, be more of a gentleman." And he wrote back and said, "Why? I go hard on her because I know she can handle it." And I absolutely loved that, you know, because we're not asking for special treatment or this. We're here because we feel like we could run with the big dogs, you know, and there is a place for us. There's a place for more of us as well. I hate that people think that every show needs the token woman or the token Black woman or the token Latina woman. No, I would love the fact that we got to have 5 Latina women and 1 Afro-Latina on Sports Center Mexico the other day, and it went down very well, and we were intelligently talking about football. And as I jokingly said after, no kitchens were blown up, babies were still fed, diapers were still changed, so people don't have to be like, "Oh, get back to your chores." I was like, the world is still turning. It can be done. And there's so many more spots for me, for people like me, on the same table. We all can eat at the big Thanksgiving table. And that's exactly what I would like to see more of. But it definitely makes me feel very special. And it basically is a dream come true to hear that people notice and that it inspires them to even try to do the same.
Absolutely. Very well said. A woman of many talents, Alexis Nunes, again, co-host of ESPN FC. You can check her out on ESPN, not only soccer, but cricket as well. Follow her on social media as she joins us here on the program. Alexis, really appreciate the time. Thank you for doing this. Continued success in all you do.
Thank you so much for having me.